Hello, my name is Inam Wilson. I'm the head of the Labor and Employment Practice at TEMPLARS. The world of work has changed drastically in the last 2 years, and most contracts of employment are no longer suitable to meet the challenges which are the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll be discussing how to adapt the contracts of employment to the new realities with my colleague, Oghomwen Akpaibor. Let's meet Oghomwen. Hello, Oghomwen.
Hello, all.
We are facing a very interesting times in the world of work today. Oghomwen, between late 2019 and today, the world of work has changed.
Yes, indeed, it has. And from what I see, a lot of employers are trying to understand how to deal with the new world of work and are trying to put in place different innovative workplace measures to ensure that employees are kept safe and to ensure that they are able to adapt to new realities.
Absolutely. And this is the reason why this topic is so important today. A lot of employers think, oh, well, we'll ride the tide and we'll see how things goes. But by the time you're done with this podcast, you'll find out that you really need to take action. And one of those actions is to go back and look at your contracts of employment.
I think it's very important that employers do that. That is, go back to their employment contract, because what you find now is that there's a lot of, the order of the day is remote working in most organizations. Some other organizations have also adapted a hybrid kind of work arrangement where you spend some days working in the office and other days you work from home.
Absolutely. So let's talk about remote working briefly. You find that 2 years ago, it was a strange thing talking about remote working or flexible working arrangements. Now it's in place, and you have to find a way to regulate it. Because from an employer's perspective, you want to be sure that if the employee says he's working from home or out of the house, he's indeed working from home. And so you have to put measures in place.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%, Mr. Wilson, because sometimes, for mothers like me, we find ourselves torn between work and domestic issues, and you just have to balance it out. You cannot afford to lose sight of the fact that even though you are working from home, you are required to put in the effort and the man hours as though you were working from the office.
Absolutely. So there are certain things the employee needs to understand when working out of home. When you're working, you are working. Assume you are in the office. That's number one. Number two, for instance, your communications have to be with it's an official email address. If you're using a remote storage facility, you store your documents on those facilities. You cannot, on the excuse of you're working remotely, use your private emails for official work. And then also, you should be in the office, so you cannot entertain a client, for instance, in your house.
That's very true. That's very true. And employees should definitely take note of that. Employers should also, I believe, would also have to find ways to ensure that employees are actually doing what they should be doing. What are some of those ways you think employers can?
Well, this is where technology comes into play, because you will need to have suitable technologies that will monitor employee work. Some organizations have this in place.
Well.
Time tracking is one of them. You have, for instance, there are times we work and review documents, and you can see from everybody's in different places, people are in different places, you can see that people are reviewing the documents. So technology comes into play.
Yeah. Okay, so very close to this is, and this is a burning issue, is the employer's duty of care.
Absolutely.
Now, the employer's duty of care is deeply enshrined in common law as well as labor law jurisprudence in Nigeria. I have always wondered, to what extent what is the scope of this employer's duty to employees?
It's a very broad scope for the employer. The duty of care is wide because the employer is the provider of the work environment. It's a workspace, and so there are liabilities that go there that attaches to the owner of the workplace. So for instance, if you ask your employee to work in the office and the employee gets infected or is exposed to the COVID virus, that's a potential issue. So there's a duty of care under contract and the duty of care under tort, and this would apply regardless of the situation.
Let's not also forget the NCDC guidelines on measures that employers are required to put in place.
Absolutely.
It is important that employers take note of that and ensure that the workplace is safe to avoid liabilities. Now, speaking of liabilities, we know that with change and innovation comes new risks and unforeseeable liabilities. New risk because nobody ever envisaged the magnitude of COVID-19, especially in the workplace. I mean, I can think of certain risks like, privacy infringement, wrongful termination arising from some of these issues. What can you tell employers to put in place to ensure that these risks and liabilities are significantly mitigated, if not completely avoided?
Okay, so one of those risks that we should also mention is the big issue of whether to be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated. That's a universal issue. It's not even just an issue in Nigeria. It's an issue that cuts across the globe. And so you find that in jurisdictions where there is little regulation in terms of guidance from the government, for instance, where there are little changes in the contracts of employment, the risk becomes heightened.
Would you say Nigeria is one of those jurisdictions?
Nigeria is one of the high-risk areas because you find that a lot of people are reluctant to tweak with their contracts of employment, but that has to be done inevitably because people need to know what the rules are to be able to know what is within the rules and outside the rules. So, but you find that the issue of whether to vaccinate or not to vaccinate brings to light the conflicting rights of the employer to keep the workplace safe and the employee to have his freedom to choose whether to be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated. But imagine if this was in the contract of employment, then it provides clarity for both parties.
So would you say the duty of an employer to keep the workplace safe is a strong enough basis for mandating vaccination in the workplace?
Well, I would put it this way. There has to be a common sense approach to the issue because I'm sure with a little bit of innovation and thinking, both parties can find a workable solution. There should be a mandate to vaccinate, but if you're unable to submit yourself to vaccination and you have good reasons for doing that, then there should be measures that should be put in place to allow that flexibility. So you can put in place remote working for the employee, or you can mandate that, okay, we need to see your negative test, COVID tests on a regular basis. And so these things can be worked around. Then speaking of liability also, we have the National Industrial Court of Nigeria. They are waiting for employers and employees because a lot of issues are going to arise from this change in the workplace.
Definitely.
And so between you and I don't know how the decisions will go, but it will help to have a contract to rely on if you're an employer to say, these are the terms of the contract than if you don't. Because in the absence of regulations from the government,
Yes.
your contract of employment becomes your fallback.
You have heard it all. The world of work is changing and changing drastically. These changes are here to stay, so we should all do well to shape up and adapt to this new reality. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. My name is Oghomwen Akpaibor and
My name is Inam Wilson.
goodbye.
Bye.